Hey there, Josh Powers with Polygonflow. In today's video, I wanted to give you a full environment creation tutorial, starting from an empty scene and finishing with some stunning results using Dash, our world building tool inside Unreal Engine. So the first thing I did was create a plane through the Dash prompt bar by typing plane and making sure to choose Create Primitive. This plane will be what I use for the creek bed of my scene, so I scale it up to fit the size I need. The plane in this case will merely act as an agent to scatter assets on here in a little bit. But still, I want to give the plane a material that closely resembles what I want just in case there's any gaps in the scatter we do. Alright, with that placed, we'll go back to the Dash content library and we'll go ahead and search for a good stone wall and drag it out onto the plane we just made. Using Dash to place assets really speeds up my workflow, as I can very quickly move, scale, and rotate any asset I drag in from the content library. And once I'm happy with the position of this asset, I'll go ahead and duplicate it a few times and just move it down the line to build out the length of the retaining wall I need for this scene. In the reference image, there's yet another retaining wall built up behind the stone wall. This one is concrete and obviously more modern. We could build this out in several different ways, but today I'm going to briefly go through how I created it using Unreal's in-editor modeling tools. The Unreal Editor has a set of modeling tools that can be used right inside your scene. And while these tools are not quite as refined and powerful as what you might find in 3D packages such as Blender and Maya, there are quite a few tools I leverage on a regular basis for my scenes to avoid going back and forth between UE5 and my modeling software. The UV mapping and displacement tool in this system are especially powerful, and I highly recommend checking out this feature more in depth. Alright, now that the wall is modeled and UV'd, I can go back to the content library and search for a good concrete material. And then just drag it onto the model, and voila, the wall model is complete. Okay, you'll notice that I dragged a few extra planes around my scene, and even though we won't see most of them in camera, I want to add some trees to them to cast some shadows into the rendered area. Alright, with that out of the way, let's scatter some stuff. And the first thing I'll do is scatter some trees throughout those planes I added. Because the trees will cast large shadows into my scene, it's important to get those into place early on, as it'll influence the choices I make on detailing out the rest of the shot. This is one of the oldest tricks in the book and allows you to give more character to your scene. And then I can just tweak my light direction a little bit, and I think this is feeling pretty good, so we can go ahead and move on to the next steps. I'll go ahead and add some megascan rock assemblies to the creek bed we made earlier. As always, I'll just go to the content library, search for the right asset, and then drag it out onto the plane while holding Control. Once I let go of the mouse button, I can then choose Scatter here, and the assets will scatter all along the plane. I only need to make some basic adjustments to this scatter, such as density and scale. Besides that, all the default settings should work for me. And just like that, we're already seeing a lot of visual interest with this creek bed. With the rocks on the ground, I can go ahead and add a new plane from the prompt bar, scale it up and move into position, and then I'll give it a water material from the Dash prompt bar by just typing water and then choosing the set water material option. It doesn't get any easier than that. So one of the biggest things that stood out to me about the reference is the fallen yellow leaves on top of the stone wall. So this is going to be what I hit next. In previous videos, I've covered how Dash can take an atlas map of leaves and turn them into geometry alpha cards with just a few clicks. So because I have these leaves already imported into my project from before, I could just find them in my content browser and drag them into my scene. With the leaf selected, I'll just type surface scatter into the Dash prompt bar, which will pop up a full properties menu for the scatter tool. I'll go ahead and add these leaves to my scatter objects. And then after selecting my stone wall objects, I'll add those to the surface objects, and right away we can see the leaves starting to scatter across the wall. Obviously, as you can see, the leaves are scattered all over the wall, which could be okay in this case, as leaves would be bound to get stuck in the crevices of some of the rocks, but I'd rather have more control over that myself. Now there are several ways I could approach this, but I think the easiest and fastest way in this particular situation is to leverage the second retaining wall. So I'll go ahead and grab my leaves, then the wall, and then just click the proximity masking icon up here. Now all I need to do is extend the distance out closer to the edge of the top row of rocks, and now we're clear to adjust the other settings to build up this strip of leaves using a mixture of density, scale, and various masking options like the noise breakup. We can also utilize the remove mask option under the feature masking dropdown. This will randomly remove instances of your scatter as you increase the value, allowing for the breakup to feel even more natural and organic. I'll do the same thing for the moss as I did with the leaves. Since I'd already used Dash to create alpha mesh cards for my moss, I just scattered them onto the stone walls, played with a few of the settings to get the breakup I want, and then adjusted the angle mask to limit where the moss would scatter. But there's one issue I have here, and that's that I don't want the moss on top of the stone wall. Not only is it inconsistent with the reference, but it also competes with the leaves, and so I'd rather not have it up top. To fix this, I can just lower the max height mask until it removes the moss from the top. The min and max height mask is a really fantastic way to limit the verticality of your scatter. For the next steps, I'm doing very standard methods of scattering, tweaking a variety of the basic settings such as density, scale, breakup, and seed, as well as some of the other settings we've just gone over like add or remove, and min and max height. We've worked hard to make sure that the basic settings are flexible enough to give you the results you want right out of the box, while also giving some more nuanced options that really let you fine-tune things when necessary. Just by adding some small branches and pebbles along both walls, we really start to get a subtle but impactful look of realism to the scene. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the key to realism is layering the details carefully so that it's there, but not overpowering. It's always important to have good reference images to study to see how these types of natural buildups occur in real life. Though it's common practice to exaggerate some of these details in game art, for more realistic renders such as this, I feel that results are much better when we really strive to nail those subtleties. Alright, things are looking pretty good here, so what I want to do now is add some decals to the scene. Again, keeping in mind that I want this to feel more realistic, I'm not going to go overboard with the decals. Rather, I'll use the decals for the most part to just break up tiling and add some secondary and tertiary details to the scene. Using Dash's decal placement tool makes such a task incredibly easy and rewarding. I can quickly move, scale, and rotate the decal placement on the fly without ever having to change modes, which allows me to just focus on my art and stay in that creative zone rather than constantly switching gears. And for a couple of final touches, I can add some of the leaves to these plants growing out of the stone wall. Remember, these are scattered assets, and will scatter onto that scatter, which is an incredible way to layer detail that will dynamically update when you make adjustments to the scatter settings. And to close, I'll go ahead and run a post-processing and color grading pass. The workflow here is fairly simple. We select the lens icon on the Dash prompt bar, and then we can adjust the depth of field, vignetting, exposure, and much more. And once we're happy with that base, we move on to the color grading. Here I can either type cycle grading in the prompt bar to cycle through all the available options, or just type the color grading we have in mind on the prompt bar and then hit enter. And that's it. We've built this scene in barely any time, and the results are looking great. And don't forget, we've got an active Discord community where we create environment art, give each other feedback, and improve as artists. Make sure to join us, share what you've managed to create, and chat with the Dash dev team in the process. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please let me know in the comments what type of environments that you struggle with, and I'll make sure to cover them in future tutorials. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.